G'day folks, welcome to another episode of Learn to Paint TV. Rod Moore here with you again from the Learn to Paint Academy. Now what we're going to do in this week's episode is a little scene inspired by the Impressionists and in particular Monet. It's going to be a little country landscape scene and we're going to have some nice pastel colours in there and you know that Impressionist feel. Now I just sketched this out of my little sketchbook and you can see on the left hand side you've got a bit of a clumping of trees there. And then we've got this big field with lots of directional lines leading the eye into the painting. Some distant hills, some bluey hills in the distance. And we'll make it a nice blue sky with some fluffy clouds, some fluffy white clouds in there. And as you can see here, I have got a 12-inch by 16-inch board that I prepared with gesso. And if you don't know how to do that, then have a look at our videos in the Art Studio Chat series where I go through how to prepare boards. So I'll just take a bit of water. We'll take our blue and our permanent alizarin crimson there. We'll mix those two together and get a bit of a dark tone there with a bit of water. Now if I just come back to our image here, you can see I've got this strong vertical shape which is the main tree on the left hand side there, and that really is you know, a framing device which is going to allow the eye to run sort of down the tree and then into the painting. So that's why we've got that there. So what we want to do now is just with our drawing is just start to get a bit of a feel for where that might be. And let's say the tree is going to terminate, the base of it's going to be somewhere around there. So we're going to have it rise up here. It's going to be a fairly big tree, okay? It's going to pop out the top of the canvas there. So it's one big sort of dominating shape there, okay? Something like that. And that'll give us a nice, nice big, strong, dark mass in the foreground there, okay? Now beyond that, so we're going to have these directional lines that run into the painting, but where are they going to run to? There's going to be a distant sort of horizon line through there with a mountain range. You can make up the mountain range because I've just made up this little sketch, right? So the mountain range could be any shape that you want. Just be careful that you don't sort of have a repeating pattern of shapes in there, but something like that, okay? And a bit of a horizon line there. And we'll then have a few little trees that sit in the background there. Okay. So there's a couple of big shapes, aren't there? We've got this big tree here, which I might bring that back in there with a bit of shadow. And then we've got the mountain range there with the horizon line and a few little trees. So that's another big shape. Pretty simple to do so far. And so that's step one, our drawing. Pretty easy. As you can see, it's a little subject I've made up. I was looking at some photos of Monet, his paintings. Thought, oh, something along those lines would be nice. So we're not copying his paintings, but we're using inspiration. We're drawing inspiration from different areas. So pretty simple little step one. Anybody can do this, and that's the beauty of the Moore method of painting, of course, is that anybody can learn to paint with what we are doing here. So we're now going to move to step two, and step two is where we start to block in colour here now. So we always start off with our darks, and basically what we want to do is get a nice big dark for the tree and for these hay bales, and then we'll reduce the value back into the distant area here. Then we'll block in the sky, and we'll block in the field. So the blocking is going to be pretty simple here. Take our big flat brush, we'll get some of this ultramarine blue, and pop that there with some of the alizarin crimson, okay? This is going to be our darkest value. A little bit of water into that, not too much, but a little bit just to make the paint flow, and a tiny pinhead of the yellow ochre. Okay, I'll get it a little bit cooler, a bit more blue into it. Now this is just the blocking at this stage, so you want to keep that paint fairly thin. So there's water in there, okay? Don't make this a thick paint, and as you can see, it's going on there quite thin, and that's what you want. So whenever we do our blocking, we're utilising a thin amounts of paint, because we want to then be able to paint over that. So our darks are always done fairly thin, utilising sort of semi-transparent or transparent colours, so it doesn't end up too strong, the dark, right? And by using thin, just a little bit of water in there, keep that paint thin. What that means is when that water dries out, I can then come back in and work over the top of it with our midtones and highlights, right? Just be careful of your overall shape. Shapes are pretty important with trees and edges. Okay, we'll get some shadow in there like so. And look, that's not too bad. That's workable. We're on the right track. Okay, so now I need a bluey grey for that distant row of mountains. So I'll again take our French ultramarine blue. We'll just pop it on the corner. A little touch of the alizarin. And now we need a little bit of white in there. Another little touch of the yellow. So we're going for a bluey grey. Okay, which that certainly is. However, let me just come down to the palette here so you get a closer look. Okay, that's definitely a bluey grey, but it's a bit flat and a bit dull. So we'll push it bluer. Okay, and we'll just get a little bit more white into it. Okay, so it's still a bluey grey, but it's got a little bit more life in it now. And so let's just come in here and just test that. Okay, you can see there it's not a bad little tone for a distant mountain. And it's a mountain range. You've got that peak there. Of course, you can do your mountains any sort of shape or way that you want to do them in your version. You're not locked in to copying mine. I think it's probably just a little bit too dark and beige. So I'm going to add more white and more blue into it. Let's just pop some of that on. I'm not going to completely block out what I've just done, but just a little bit of that lighter tone there I think will help. Yeah, I think that's probably a better overall tone. Overlapping trees here. So this is all pretty simple stuff, right? This is why I say that, you know, pretty much anyone can learn to paint with the Moore method, because what we're showing you here is nothing that complicated so far, right? It's all pretty easy to do. It's just a matter of following a few basic principles and steps, and that's what we try and teach you at the Learn to Paint Academy. You know, little simple basics like how to mix color, things like that that you can easily pick up and learn. Okay, another large flat brush. We'll take our red, we'll take our yellow, get a little touch of the white into that. So why, when I'm blocking in, do I use this orange tone? Well, for a start, we need to get an undertone or an underpainting down before we put our greens in. If you just go straight green, then you're green over white, which never quite works out well. That white will shine through the green and just dull your greens down. So by putting this orange tone through, the light will go through the greens and bounce off this orange tone. This orange tone will then filter into the green. And that's good because the reddy orange tone is a complement of green. So it just makes your greens vibrate and hum with a little bit more life and energy. Okay, now notice I'm doing this really thin. It's a little bit on the grey side at the moment because I'm doing some distant, we're painting the distant part here, but it's very thin paint. It's a lot of water in there. Why thin paint? Because we want it to dry off so we can then apply our greens over the top of it. So remember, our blocking is always, we always use a thin layer for our blocking. And this will be the same if you're using traditional oils. You would use more thinner at this stage when you're doing the blocking. Now, if you're using acrylics, because you know everything I'm doing here, you just do exactly the same process as acrylics, but you don't need to make your initial blocking a thin layer, because the way I teach is you go and have a break after you finish your blocking, right? So it's not as important with acrylics. However, I like to teach in a way that you have a transferable skill. You can go and use the oils if you want to. So it's helpful to get into the right habits. Okay, I'm just going to strengthen up that ready tone now as we come forward. Okay. Now I'm going to make this a nice blue sky, and then as we get to the horizon here, I'm going to put in just some very subtle clouds with a bit of shadow in them. So we want to have our light perhaps coming sort of more down that way through the painting. Okay, so that means we're going to have shadow on this side of the clouds, and it'll give us highlights on this side of the tree, a little bit of shadow there, and a little bit of highlight around our hay bales and so on, maybe a little touch of highlight along the mountain ridge. So what we need to do, so I'm going to use a little bit less of the water here now. Okay, so I'm going to take this white, and I'll try and get some more of a pure blue tone here. So you can see that. I'll maybe go to the palette cam so you can see the mix. Okay, let's just pop that in. So basically what we want is like a nice sort of spring day. We've got a bit of sunshine happening. So you can see what I've done there. I've just worked around the trees here and got in a couple of layers of this paint, and now I just want to lighten that value off as we come down. So see that? I've got now a lighter value. I'll blend that in a moment, and I'll just work around the shapes that I've designated there for our clouds. More white. So the best approach is just to paint up to the mountains first. Get your coat of paint in there. And then pull paint out of the brush, just with some paper towel. I'm just pulling the paint out, and then just come up to those edges and then just run the brush along the edge there. And keep cleaning your brush as you go, because what's going to happen is you're going to pick up that dark tone, and we don't necessarily want to pull that into our sky. Let us now just go to a slightly smaller brush. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of blue and red. Pop that there. We need a bit of white. Okay, and we want to get a grey. It's fairly purple, so I'll just add a little bit of yellow into that. Needs a bit more blue. Okay, and then we can just, ooh, that seems a bit dark. A little bit more white. That's about it. Okay, now I'm just going to be careful when I hit that work that I've already done there, that's obviously going to just lighten that right off. Well, make that one slightly taller. Now again, I'm not going to try and finish these clouds here. I'm going to just pop that dark in. clean up my brush, and I can just soften underneath. But really, I just want to let that paint set, so we'll come back. I know I said I like to get my sky finish in one hit, but just getting these clouds right, we'll come back into this sky. So we're now into step 3 of the Moore method of painting, which is all about our, bringing the painting together, basically details, finishing touches and highlights. So let's get ourselves underway. So where I think we'll start off with is just seeing if we can't get some of this lighter tone. I'll scrape it off with a palette knife just to get us back to no paint there if we can. Get a bit of paper towel here, and then we can paint over that shape of that mountain and just readjust it. So I don't know, this might be too dry already. I know there's a little bit coming off there, that's okay. Just pull off whatever you can. And I like showing these sort of decisions to, because I think often in instructional videos and so on with art, you don't see this reworking side of it. And all the great artists would do that very thing. So we'll just come back in and we'll mix up a bluey tone that's going to be lighter than that blue tone that we've already got there. Because it's too dark, I think, for one. And also the shape of it's not quite right. So I think maybe we'll just take this opportunity just to reshape it. Just get that tone right. So maybe we just have a more of a gentle rise, kind of like that through there. And the rest of it we can go over with our more opaque sky colour. Okay, so don't worry about that too much just at the moment. Might keep that little bit in there. Remember we put in some tree shapes, so let's keep those in. I think that's going to be a more pleasing tone here now. So let's get a big chunk of that white. Pop that there. So we know it's going to have a bit of blue in it, but we're also going to pop a little bit of yellow ochre and a little bit of red into there. Okay. Let's push that to a light orange, light olive tone there. We don't really want that. Pop a bit more red into it. Maybe just a touch of the warmer yellow. Okay, now I don't want that everywhere. Let's just, yes, that's a fairly strong tone. Let's get another mix happening right there with just our white and our blue. You can see they're pretty much the same sort of value there. Okay. I'll put this in as the predominant lower sky colour there. Bring it down to the closer camera view there so you can get a bit more of a view. So I want to get that edge along that mountain ridge fairly soft. So that's a much more pleasing shape in there now, isn't it? Doesn't have to be any particular sort of shape. I'll just drop it slightly more forward than the main tree. Okay. Just by bringing it down a little bit. Okay, and you can see in there, that's now our forward bush, which I'll really hit that with the highlights a bit more than the bush behind it. So with the bush behind, we'll just strengthen up the darks. We'll take our ultramarine blue there, and we'll get back into that red alizarin crimson as our red. It won't be quite as punchy, but it'll still have a bit of punch, but not as much. See that? A little bit on the purple side, so I just get a little pinhead of the yellow into it. Okay. So run that. So I'm just going to just strengthen up that dark. Now just be careful of the sky being wet, because you'll pick up that light tone and then it'll just weaken off your darks. If you want to have good strong darks in your painting, you have to avoid that lighter tone as much as you can. Okay. And I do think we need to just push out the foliage out that side a little. Okay. Okay, there you can see the obvious advantage of having put that dark down initially. So there's going to be just a green field, grasses and so on. So let's just test that. Now that underpainting is still a little bit wet because I'm using the oils, as you know. So just going to be mindful of that. What that means is when you're applying wet paint over wet paint like this, you don't want to be pressing too hard. You just want to be just lightly running the brush along. If you press too hard, then you'll smudge the two layers of paint together. And of course, if you do that, then you know what will happen is it'll all end up in a muddy mess. And haven't we all made a muddy mess at some stage, right? Getting some different tones coming off the brush here. And I can also go a little bit warmer. So a bit of yellow ochre, a bit of red. Let's have a little bit of variety in there. We've already got the red underneath. So you don't need too much red in here, but a little bit here and there doesn't hurt. And then you can push the greens to a darker version of those greens as well, especially where there's not a lot of light getting in, like around the base of this main tree here. It's obviously a series of greens, but I'm going to punch it up a little with the phthalo green just to help us get a bit more punch in there. Okay, or viridian green, either one. Perhaps a little touch of that red, a little touch of that yellow ochre. Okay, now I'm just going to, light's coming from the right hand side we'd established, so we just want to make sure that we put that light in just the right places. And it's a feathery touch that I'm using here. Again, be careful, you know, popping it out into that white sky. It will overpower everything. Okay, off to a bit of a good start there. See how that, the way we shape up that foliage, kind of critical to getting the shape of the tree looking right. Getting 3 dimensions into that tree. And as we come down away from the light, we're going to go just slightly darker. Okay, but notice how critical that initial dark tone is to making this work. Okay, so I'm going to take our phthalo green, pop that there. I'm going to take our cadmium yellow, not all of it, it's getting a bit stiff. Mix those two together, and look at that for a punchy looking green. A little touch of white, okay, maybe a touch of the yellow ochre, a touch of the alizarin. And this is going to be the the brightest part of the whole painting. So it's going to be that part of the painting that's going to command most of the attention to the eye. But that's okay. We need a little bit of a focal point like that. A little bit of pure phthalo in there. And it doesn't need much, does it? Just needs a few little touches. And what I think we'll do is we'll use a little bit of yellow ochre in the highlights on the clouds, because that'll continue the theme of the highlights that we've put in over the mountains there. We'll just warm it up a bit so we get some of this white. A little clip of the yellow ochre. That's probably too much, so we'll get another chunk of white. Okay. I'm going to load the brush up a fair bit, and just going to drag it around the edges of this cloud here. And really what we're doing here is pretty much the same process as what we do with the trees, isn't it? Putting a highlight around the edges. And with the cloud, we just need a little bit, that little bit softer. Okay, so what I'm going to need here now is a clean dry brush. Clean dry brush. And I just want to soften in those edges. Okay, so just a little bit of very delicate blending here and there. In the outer extremities though, I don't want to lose that nice sharpness. So don't over blend it. It's a very delicate little touch that you need. And it's one that you can only really learn by having a go. So no amount of being told what to do will help you with learning how to blend in your clouds like this. The only real way of learning it, of course, is to put paint down. So we'll leave this one as being last of the hay bales in a I guess it would be a summer field. Push up a little bit of grass around the bottom of those hay bales there. Well, folks, I think we've come to an end with this one. I'm pretty happy the way it's come up. It's a nice little landscape with a summer sort of feel to it, with some wispy clouds, maybe a little bit of a storm's just come through. And we've got the last of the hay bales here in the landscape there, and some nice greens popping. I like the way this tree here pops, and I like the movement of the clouds and the way that they are touching the edges of those hills there. And I'm so glad that we changed the shape of that hill. It just wasn't working, you know, and this is the important thing. Sometimes it's good to go away and have a fresh eyes look at what you're doing and come back. Because when I came back, I saw it immediately. I thought, oh, those hills just don't work, right? So overall, I'm pretty happy with how we've gone. There's the painting there. Seems to have worked. It's close to my original concept, if I have a look at that. That was my original concept. I was going to put in a little image of a farmer or something, but I don't know that that's going to necessarily enhance what we do here. So we won't bother. Overall, a good little project. It's a fun one. It's got a kind of an impressionistic feel to it. You could add in some flowers and things like that in there if you wanted to give it a bit more punch and colour. But as it is, we've got reds coming through from the underpainting. We've got mauves and purples that we put in there. We've got blues and yellows and greens. We've got a variety of greens, and that's really important. A green can be a boring colour if you don't know how to mix subtle shifts in temperature and value and so on. So we've managed to get that in here. You know, we've got this brightest green concentrated here. We've got these lovely mid-tone highlights on our main tree. Overall, I think it's a painting that's working, and it's definitely one that I think you'd be pretty happy with how to go at this one. All right, so give it a go and see how you end up with it. This is the last of the hay bales in a summer landscape. A lot of fun. Enjoyed it. I've done it with water mixable oils. You could just as easily do it with acrylics, and either way, you'll enjoy doing this one. Hope you've enjoyed it. Now, make sure you go to our Learn to Paint Academy and register for the free course, okay? It's a complete course in the Moore method of painting, designed for beginner to intermediate painters. And I'll show you more about this approach that we've used and how you can use it to start creating great looking landscapes and seascapes as well. All you need to do is go to the web address, www.learntopaint.academy, register for the free course. You'll see the link on the main page there, and go through the free course. And I think you'll find it just as enjoyable as this painting here has been. Let me know how you go with it, and I'll see you next week on Learn to Paint TV. Cheers till then.